days of gratitude. As you saw in the video, gratitude changes everything. But unfortunately, gratitude is too often based on satisfaction. And satisfaction is a temporary thing. Unfortunately, gratitude is too often based on satisfaction, but satisfaction is a temporary thing. Let me give you an example. When I was in high school, I had to have surgery on my right leg, was out of commission for like 6 months, all casted up and everything. It was my right leg, and if you drive a car, you know that your right leg is fairly important in your ability to drive a vehicle. It can be definitely inhibited and you're not able to drive. And so for 6 months, I was out of commission, not able to drive a car. And as a teenager, that's a big blow. I mean, you want to be able to be independent and stay out and hang with your friends and go where you want to do, because this is my life and ain't nobody telling me what to do with my life until I come home before curfew because my parents told me to be home before curfew. And then it's whatever they want, because that's just how the deal goes. But when I got the car, man, it's my way or the highway, right? And it's all highway. I'm loving it. But this was taken away from me. And for those 6 months, I couldn't drive. And it was really hard for those 6 months. But at the end of those 6 months, I remember very vividly my dad teaching me a lesson about gratitude. You see, we had just gone to the doctor's office, and it was the doctor's visit that we've been waiting for months. The okay to begin putting pressure on my leg and being able to drive again. So I hopped into the office on crutches and walked out of the doctor's office without crutches. And I'm like, I'm about to drive. Let's get in the car. Hopped into the driver's seat, was about to throw it into reverse and kick it out when my dad said, Dave, before you do that, it's always good to just pause in these situations and say thank you to God. And from that moment on, I learned a lot about gratitude. I learned how important it is to live a life of gratitude. But it's so interesting how easy it was in that moment to say thank you to God, because I had just received what I'd been waiting for. See, but that changes so quickly because satisfaction is just a temporary thing. It wasn't long after that I moved off to college, and it was so interesting. I went to Concordia University, Wisconsin, and it's cold almost every week of the school year. It's so cold that they tell you, and part of their recruiting thing is, don't worry, you don't have to go outside. We have tunnels between the buildings, and if they were stacked up next to another Concordia University like the one in Irvine, they say, we don't need tunnels because it's always beautiful here, right? I should have listened to the Irvine, the people in California gone to school there and not worried about tunnels. But, we went to school, and that first year of college, I don't know if this was like this for you, but they didn't let freshmen have cars on campus. And all of a sudden, what I had taken for granted, this idea of being able to be independent, be able to drive wherever I want to and do whatever I want, was taken away from me. And in that moment, it was amazing how I felt so unthankful. Gratitude was something that was so far from my mind because I was not satisfied with what was given to me. And again, I had to wait for something I didn't have. You see, in the song that we sang, the desert song, we're going to be singing that the next couple of weeks because what it paints for us is a beautiful picture of different seasons of our lives. But what never changes in those seasons is the ability to be grateful and to live with gratitude. You heard a season of fire, a season of battle, a season of the harvest, as that last verse said. Today, we want to focus on one of those verses, the season of the desert. How are we grateful? How do we show gratitude when we're always waiting for what's next and never observing or grateful for what we already have? Isn't it so deeply ingrained in us to always strive for and have your eye on what you don't yet have? Graduating to the next level, getting to the next class, passing that test to be able to move forward. Moving on in different stages of life, moving off to college, getting a job, getting a promotion in the job, having this season of life in your relationships, but always longing for the next stage of your life in terms of relationships. Everything we have, we've always been ingrained in this idea of longing and dreaming for more, which is a beautiful thing. And God's created us to respond to his goodness in such a way. But what can happen in those moments is that we end up waiting for something that will someday be ours, or we hope will someday be ours, or will someday hopefully be our reality. And what we end up doing is also waiting on being grateful. And we think, and sometimes it can just kind of find its way into our minds, that when we get there, then I can live a life of gratitude. When I'm in that relationship, then I can live a life of gratitude. When we get that home, that car, that stage of our life, when we move to that city, then we can have some gratitude. Then we'll have something to say thank you to God for. But God says you can actually be grateful no matter the season that you're in. So what I want us to do today is turn to Psalm 78. And I want you to see a recounting of a story that happens, a historical event that happens actually in the book of Numbers. Numbers chapter 11. If you want to write that down and go back and look at that later, you can read the whole chapter. Psalm 78 really kind of sums it up nicely for us and tells and recounts the events of what happened to the Israelites just 3 days after they left Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, if you remember, is the place where Moses was given the 10 Commandments. The people of Israel were given the 10 Commandments by God. And they set out on their journey from Mount Sinai to pursue the promised land, what they had been promised, what they were waiting for, looking ahead for what they were waiting for. And here in Psalm 78, we hear that how quickly the Israelites have lost their heart of gratefulness, gratitude, and have begun grumbling or murmuring. Look here, Psalm 78. Let's begin in verse 11 here of Psalm 78. Again, this is a recounting of the event that happens in Numbers chapter 11, if you want to read that later. Here we are, 78, verse 11. They, the Israelites, forgot what God had done, the wonders he had shown them. He did miracles in the sight of their fathers in the land of Egypt, in the region of Zon. He divided the sea and led them through. He made the water stand firm like a wall. Remember the story of the Red Sea? Verse 14, he guided them with a cloud by day and with light from the fire all night, so that they would always know that he's with them. Verse 15, he split the rocks in the desert and gave them water as abundant as the seas. He brought streams out of a rocky crag and made water flow down like rivers. Verse 17, but they, the Israelites, continued to sin against him, rebelling in the desert against the Most High. They willfully put God to the test by demanding the food they craved. They spoke against God, saying, "Can God spread a table in the desert?" Let's just pause right there. You can hear the heart of the Israelites shifting towards this idea of, yeah, God was good then, but what has God done for me lately? I mean, I'm waiting here, God, and all we got showing up is manna, and we can only make manna in so many different ways. In fact, if you read Numbers 11, you'd see that they tried making manna and grinding it up and putting it up into little cakes, and they'd fry them in oil, and it says it tastes like cake fried in oil. I mean, that's what Numbers 11 says. How many days can you get by with manna? Well, for them, it was 3. 3 days they had been dealing with this manna, and they're getting fed up. In fact, if you read Numbers 11, they say, back in Egypt, we had it so good. There we had meats, and we had cucumbers, and we had garlic. I mean, they were listing all the things that they longed for, they craved for, and they keep on telling each other, and they say to God, God, why are we here when we had it so much better back in Egypt? But actually, they didn't have it better in Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt, and now they were free. And yet, even though freedom is such a beautiful thing, their hearts craved what they did not have: cucumbers, garlic, food, meats, and lost sight of what they really do have. See, gratitude is usually fairly simple when we're satisfied. But the unfortunate thing is, our tendency is that satisfaction is very temporary. And when we lose sight of what God has already done, and we put our sight on what we're waiting for, what we want to be reality, what we want to see happen in our lives, what we want to acquire or earn in our lives, our heart can shift towards bitterness. We end up saying, God, look at all I don't have. Instead of saying, God, thank you for all I do have. This week, I got a chance to catch a glimpse of the press conference of a retiring baseball player named Torrey Hunter. And if you know baseball, you know Torrey Hunter. He's been in the game for 17 years, played a lot of years with the Twins and then the Angels and the Tigers, and then went back to the Twins and spent this last season with the Twins and to kind of say, this is my homecoming. I started my career here. I want to finish my career here. You know, it's a really sweet story. And in those 17 years, Torrey Hunter actually never won a World Series. He went to the playoffs 8 different times with different teams, but never won a World Series. And through all of that, he had an opportunity this last year, instead of signing with the Twins, his family, his roots, where he grew up, where he established himself as a Major League Baseball player, he could have signed with the Kansas City Royals. Now, does anybody know anything about the Kansas City Royals? Yeah, they happened to do something pretty good a couple weeks ago, right? They won the World Series this year. So in his press conference, Torrey Hunter's in tears and people around him just saying, thank you for all you've done. And he's thanking all the people that made an investment in his life. And one reporter asks the question, Torrey, do you have any regrets with signing with the Twins this year, knowing that the Royals wanted you a year ago? They wanted you to sign with them. You could have signed with them. And maybe even made more money than you did with the Twins. Do you have any regrets? You know what Torrey said? He said, I look back on my 17 years as a Major League Baseball player. I gave everything I had. And not just on the field. Man, I played hard and I played through injuries and I did everything I could to help our team win and to be a part of this team. But, I poured into guys all over the place, on and off the field. I took time in the dugout to invest in guys, and you don't see the fruit of that now, but I'm telling you, the way that I invested in them and cared for them and mentored them, you're going to see the difference in them in the days and years to come. I know that the way I invested in those guys, more than just baseball knowledge, you can tell, he's a man of faith. You can tell that he's talking about investing faith into these teammates and these coaches and these friends and these people that worked in the organizations. The way that he invested in them is going to make a difference for eternity. He said, do I have regrets? I wouldn't call them regrets. Every human being says, man, I wish I could have had this. I wish I would have done that. Sure, there's parts of me that do that. But then he said this. He said, you know what? Here's my look on life. I don't think about what I don't have. I'm grateful for what I do have. And you know what? As important as a World Series championship might have been, I don't think he would trade that for the difference he made in people's lives. You see, what can happen and what I learned when he said that and what Scripture shows us is that when we're waiting for something else to happen so that we can be grateful, we often miss out on what's actually happening in our midst. If everything we do and everything we long for is something we don't yet have, then what are we missing out on that we do have? The real question that we need to ask ourselves this morning is, what are we waiting for? To be grateful. What are we waiting for to have a heart of gratitude? What are we looking for that we don't yet have, that we're so fixed to that we miss what God is doing in our lives in this moment? And we're waiting for something else, saying, when I get to that place or into that home or when I get to that relationship status, when I see this happen in my life, then I'll have something to be grateful for. See, I think God actually wants to be at work in our lives right now. In fact, I know that what God has given you and what he's doing in your life is greater than anything else that you need. You see, when we come to God and we grumble like the Israelites here did, what we're saying is, yeah, God, what you did and everything, yeah, all that rescuing all of mankind and working to create a new creation and renewing all things and making all things new again, yeah, that's really good and everything, God, but I don't think you're hearing me and what I'm waiting for. God, have you been listening to my prayers? Because I'm waiting for this. And I promise, once I have that, once I get to that place, once I see that in my life, then, God, you've got it all. But I'm not there yet. So, God, what are you waiting for? See, I think what's actually at stake is he's blessed us so immensely to be a blessing to other people that when we look for what we're waiting for, we miss on what God has already given. And if there's ever a moment where you think, or if you're like me sometimes, you think, but you don't understand how badly I want this in my life, or you don't understand how badly I need this in my life. I get that. I've been there. I've seen that. I've experienced that. Well, then what I want to do is encourage you and invite you. Come to Haiti with us next summer. I mean, come serve on a mission team. We got a meeting next week. You can come and be a part of this meeting. The details are on your life and rhythm sheet. If you feel like you don't have a lot to be grateful for, then just come with us and see what God's doing in other places with far less than what we have. See how much gratitude there is in the hearts of people who have so much less than we do, who would look at us and think for just a moment, you mean you can go and eat whenever you want to eat and get whatever you want pretty much you can have it delivered to your house? Like somebody else will make it for you and bring it to your house? I mean, just the normal concept of delivery pizza, which we take as a luxury. Now, this may not be one of your top 10 things that you're thankful for. And maybe, Pizza Hut may not make it into your gratefulness, your gratitude journal this month, but just taking the things that we take so for granted and seeing it from a different perspective and saying, wow, we have so much. You see, as I've been processing through this week, it's brought me to a point where I've had to just confess something. And for all the moments where I am lacking gratitude, what I'm really saying is, Jesus, you're good and everything, but you're just not quite enough. See, and I think that's a lie that Satan wants, and maybe it's not you, but it's definitely me, a lie that Satan wants me to believe that Jesus isn't enough. Because every time I say, God, I'm just going to wait to be grateful until I see this happening in my life, what I'm really saying is, I need Jesus, but I need Jesus and this to be satisfied, to be grateful. But you see, when I think if everything else in my life was stripped away and all I had was Jesus, I would have more than I would ever need. In fact, I know, I've gotten to hear some of your stories. I know that some of you have had everything stripped away recently. And in this season of life, in this desert, if you will, Jesus has to be enough for you because you can't rely on anything else to fill that void. You see what did it for the Israelites? If you look back here at Psalm 78, if you still have it open, it says in verse 11, they forgot what God had done, the wonders he had shown them. They forgot all that God had done. All that he did to rescue them, how he saved them, how he provided for them. You see, with God, it's not this, what have you done for me lately? But it's, God, what have you not done in Jesus? I mean, Jesus going to the cross for my sins, for your sins, to save you is more than enough. It's everything we need. And so what I want to invite you to do this morning, and in just a moment, the band's going to come up and we're going to get to sing a little bit more, but you also have an opportunity to journal a little bit. And whether it's on a piece of paper, if you brought your journal today, the one that you've been working on this last week, just to take a moment where you're at and just write down a prayer of thanksgiving. And I don't know what that looks like for you. Maybe it starts with some kind of confession. Saying, God, I have to admit to you, I have not been grateful. Here's why. But Lord, I pray that you change my heart because I have so much to be thankful for. Maybe life has been amazing for you and you have so much to be grateful for and you just want to list all the things saying, God, thank you, thank you, thank you. Maybe life has been terrible for you lately, but you still have the opportunity to look at the things God has done and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. You see, when gratitude is connected to satisfaction, and satisfaction is usually only temporary, I want and we want a gratitude that is permanent, that never wavers based on how high or how low, but is constant because Jesus is always enough, even when I'm walking through the desert.